Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this week's weekly show of the Independent Medical Alliance. I am Dr. Ryan Cole, Senior Fellow with the IMA, and tonight we have an interesting discussion with two very special guests, and we're going to be discussing a new documentary that's coming out, Beyond Breakthrough, The Shift in Cancer Care. Now, for more than 50 years, we've chased in research a single dream. Is there a cure? What magic or what solution will finally end this dreaded disease, cancer? But what if we've been searching down incorrect pathways? So that's a question we're going to discuss tonight, and this new documentary addresses. So we'll explore challenges, new perspectives. We'll touch on the conventional approaches and really perhaps redefine what healing cancer means. So before we begin, we have a preview for you of this upcoming film, and it is sparking global conversation. And anytime we get something into the zeitgeist, I think it's good for us to think of things in unconventional ways. So hopefully, it will spark some thought from both our guests, but from thousands, if not millions, of people around the world. So we will go ahead and tee up our guests in just a moment here. Our producer of the film, Justin Smith, has traveled the world. He's spoken with scientists, with doctors, with patients who themselves are rethinking cancer and everything that we thought we knew about cancer, but also address what healing it might actually look like. So before further ado, and welcoming our guests, let's go ahead and take a peek at this trailer.
Overall, $500 billion have been spent on cancer, and the gains have been very small.
President Nixon declared, quote, war against cancer. I think most people would agree that the war has not been won.
I thought we are making great progress. I'm at the place where I can make a difference. But today, I must say, I have a much more limited appreciation of these little gains.
Are we improving your quality of life and prolonging your life, or are we prolonging your deaths?
This is cancer.
Cancer will become the single commonest cause of death on the globe. Currently, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 2 men will develop cancer in their lifetime.
The mom got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Now the father got diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma. And they have 7 years old, 5 years old. This is a tragedy. 30 years of practice in medicine, this never used to happen.
In terms of curing cancer, we're not there. And so you might think that looking elsewhere at other ideas could be productive. And that's precisely what we're doing.
I was completely surprised at the amount of data there is supporting, scientific data supporting the use of non-conventional therapy for the treatment of cancer.
It was shocking when I, went deeper into the rabbit hole to find that there was even Nobel prize-winning science behind this healing-based strategy. I mean, this was shocking to me because nobody brought this up in any conversation. I never knew these things existed even.
We give them only chemo and radio. There are so many other things that could have been done.
We are guilty. We are doing a crime by not teaching our medical students what was taught thousands of years ago. We should combine it together because it works together.
By incorporating healing-based strategies, I've seen phenomenal outcomes and results, and longer-term recoveries and stable remissions, etc., which far exceed what that $500 billion has been able to achieve.
Well, after that, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing the full documentary. Joining me tonight is the filmmaker, Justin Smith. He's an independent director from the UK with over 13 years of experience and 9 feature-length documentaries focused on medicine and public health. He's also the author of Statin Nation, completed the Guardian Masterclass in Investigative Journalism, and has written for UK national newspapers, including the Sunday Telegraph. Also known to many of you is Dr. Paul Marik, IMA co-founder and our Chief Scientific Officer, whose work in metabolic and integrative therapies continues to change how we understand as well as treat cancer. So welcome, gentlemen. Great to have you both with me tonight, and I know the audience is looking forward to seeing this documentary as well. So let's start with you, Justin. So your new documentary, Beyond Breakthrough, questions long-held searches for a single cure. What inspired you to take on the topic, and how did it challenge your own views about cancer in the process?
Hello, hi everyone. Yes, for 2 or 3 years, I had the idea in the back of my mind about making a documentary film about cancer, because it occurred to me that it had been some time since a good documentary, a really informative documentary about cancer had been made. And I was very mindful of the increasing numbers of cancers, the increasing number of people, unfortunately, being diagnosed with cancer, and in particular, the increasing numbers in younger people. And perhaps even most alarmingly, after the advent of the COVID injections, this appearance of so-called turbo cancers. So I felt that a documentary would be really useful, particularly when people, if they unfortunately receive a diagnosis. At that moment, I think all too often they're just swept along with the conventional approach. And it's the worst possible time, maybe, to try and consider and to take on alternative points of view. So my original idea was to make a documentary film that was focused on natural treatments for cancer. I had sort of a preconceived idea that there was no place for any of the conventional treatments. But when I started to talk to doctors who practice integrative oncology, I realized that there is still a place for the conventional treatments when used appropriately, and in particular when combined with the other approaches into this more integrative approach. And I hadn't previously known anything about the use of repurposed drugs, which is another important area, of course. So the original focus of the documentary film was, I had a working title of something like Oncology Monopoly, and it was going to be more of an expose of the current system. But it actually developed into this different approach, which is more of an explanation of the integrative approach to oncology. And in many ways, that's better because it's more positive and it's providing information that people can use kind of immediately.
I love that, taking that solutions-based approach to it, because I think, with all the conversation worldwide and the upticks in many age groups, most age groups, unfortunately, it is really at the top of mind for many people. And I love that you focused more on that. Let's peek behind the curtain quickly and see what's been happening. But I love that you go ahead and show what we can do and think about and be prepared for those who do come across a diagnosis of cancer in a family member or themselves in a lifetime. And Dr. Marik has been focused on this for several years now, and has really focused with both the imahealth.org website. He's got the folio on alternatives to cancer. And Paul, I mean, many people have been just looking for that one drug or just that one breakthrough. What has shaped, in your mind, the field of oncology, and what limits the way that people think in the field?
So as Justin said, I think there are multiple approaches, and probably the ideal is a combination of different approaches combined together. I don't think there's one correct or one right approach. I think there are a number of different approaches, and that probably the best outcome is a combination. But I think it also depends upon the particular type of cancer that one's dealing with, whether it be a leukemia or lymphoma, or a colonic cancer or a pancreatic cancer or prostate cancer. I think the approach would differ. It depends on the patient's age, depends on how advanced the disease is. Is this, stage 1 or 2 local disease, or is this widely metastatic disease? And then also the patient's preferences. What are the patient's preferences? But I think, and I would be interested what Justin thinks, if his, someone in his family had cancer, he's interviewed these people, what does he think is the optimal approach? There's no correct approach, but, what approach would he follow? Or would he want his family member to follow?
Yeah, go ahead, Justin. That's a great question.
Well, I think my father passed away about 3 years ago from prostate cancer, and I was able to suggest some nutritional supplements for him, and that did seem to work alongside the conventional treatments that he was receiving, and at least in terms of the way he felt, after receiving those conventional treatments and the potential side effects and loss of energy and things like that. I think Paul raised a very important point about what the patient themselves are willing to accept. I understand that a really important factor is that the patient really believes in what they're doing, believes that what they're doing is the correct approach for them. So I felt for some time that sometimes you see, unfortunately, family members really trying to push. Obviously this is coming from a genuine concern for someone they really care about, but they're often trying to push them in a direction that they think is appropriate for them. And I think that just adds more stress and anxiety to the patient. And of course, psychological stress can be a huge factor in the causes and recovery from cancer. So yeah, I think it's really complicated and really has to be very much individualized. But overall, for sure, the integrative approach is surely the most appropriate way forward at this moment.
Well, I love that you bring that up, because in my mindset, that's absolutely true, the individual approach. And Paul brought up the important aspect that so many people are at a different point in their life. They go into it in a different health status. They have different pressures, and that mindset, I think, is critically important. I love that you highlight that as well, because if we can keep a focused, calm mindset, the immune system functions better. The higher stress that we experience, the less functional the immune system. And Paul, in a lot of your work, you've focused on terrain instead of the tumor. So the status of the body, the status of the individual with the condition. So how does that align with what we're seeing with what Justin's bringing forward with this integrative approach?
Yeah, so I think there are certain things that are fundamentally important. The one is diet. And so, unfortunately, if you ask the traditional oncologist, the patient asks oncologist, what can I eat? The oncologist will say, you can eat whatever you want to. You can eat ice cream or chocolate or cake, it doesn't matter. And obviously that's fundamentally incorrect. And so there are different dietary approaches, but I think because of our understanding of the metabolism of cancer and the Warburg effect and the glucose avidity, that diet is important. So I think diet needs to be a really central point in the management. Now, some people can take it to extremes and can do a really strict ketogenic diet and can do fasting. Others have difficulty adhering, but at least they need to follow some dietary advice. It's really important. And even, mainstream clinical oncology, does recognize the harm from processed foods and excess glucose. The
Yeah,
other thing,
go ahead, Paul. I was gonna go ahead.
the other thing is exercise. I mean, it sounds kind of absurd, but I mean, there's data that women with breast cancer who, participate in even light forms of exercise have a much better outcome. So, it's many lifestyle interventions. So it's not just treating the cancer, it's, treating the patient, improving the immune status, improving the overall general health of the patient. Obviously, sleep is really fundamentally important. So a patient has adequate exercise, adequate sleep, a good diet, whatever you want to define that is, access to sunshine. The sun is really very curative. And so, believe it or not, and people are surprised by this, is one of the treatments for melanoma, which people think is caused by the sun, is actually sun exposure. It actually improves the immune system and improves the outcome of melanoma. So, sunshine and being outdoors has really important health aspects. So it shouldn't just be knocking the patient with chemotherapy. There are multiple different approaches, and I think one needs a much more holistic look at the treatment of cancer.
I love that you brought up light. I think, we bathe in a toxic soup of blue light in our industrial society in which we live, and most of the Western world spends the majority of their time indoors at work. 80 to 90% of the population gets less than an hour of sunshine a day. So it's amazing just the healing power of the sun. And you think back 100 years ago, all the sanatoriums and hospitals had sun decks where they would move the patients out to soak up the sunshine, whether it's the benefits of the near infrared light, the vitamin D synthesis, whatever it may be. There's so many factors in the human body that get ignored, and one thing we can all integrate into our health and wellness routine is more time in the sun. So, Justin, you obviously got to travel widely and interview people of many mindsets and had lots of conversations. What surprised you perhaps the most in those conversations? Or was there one thing that really stood out that resonated across the spectrum of the people you interviewed?
Just before answering that, can I briefly make a comment about how Paul's work is aligned with the documentary?
Please.
So while I was doing the research for the documentary, I read Paul's monograph, Cancer Care, and I cross-referenced it with other sources. And sometimes I would start with the other sources and then come back to Paul's book and see what Paul's take is on it. And in almost every case, the information in Paul's book was more complete and more easily understood. So Paul's monograph became really a cornerstone of the documentary film. So just thought it was worth mentioning that. But in terms of what surprised me, so many things surprised me when, even though, as you mentioned earlier, I've been making documentary films about medical issues for some time. So one of the things that surprised me looking into cancer in more detail was the credentials of the scientists and doctors who have been ignored, and also the length of time that they've been ignored as well. So most people, or at least a lot of people, are now aware of the metabolic theory, the idea that cancer is a metabolic disease. And obviously Otto Warburg was the originator of that idea. I think it was 1927. And he had also previously been awarded a Nobel Prize for his work. But still, that work has been largely ignored until recent times. Also, something else that surprised me is that speaking to Dr. Vijay, who's in Malaysia, he's a very experienced consultant gynae oncologist in Malaysia, and he describes in the documentary film how we all have the propensity to create cancer within our bodies. In fact, the very fact that we are alive means that we could create cancer within our bodies. And in relation to embryonic cells, the trophoblast cells, and how they behave very much like cancer does in terms of the way the early embryonic cells invade the tissues of the mother and replicate. And so another way of looking at cancer may be that it's in a way early stem cells that are not behaving appropriately. And again, the first person to look at this was in the 19th century, a German pathologist, Julius Kornheim. In the 19th century, about 150 years ago, he made this observation that cancer behaves very much like early embryonic cells. And then his work was continued with John Beard, the well-known at the time English embryologist. And John Beard was awarded a prize by the French Academy of Sciences and was nominated for a Nobel Prize. Yet again, just conveniently forgotten about.
Yeah, that's absolutely stunning, because there's been so much good thought and so much good science that has been set aside for systems thinking or for whatever reason, financial interests. There are perhaps many reasons behind why this work doesn't come to prominence like perhaps it should. I just finished, so as a pathologist, I spent a career behind a microscope, saw about a 500,000 patients in my career. And this goes back to the individual approach, is every cancer is slightly different, and every individual is different. And I think a lot of people have the mindset, oh, cancer is just one thing. Well, through a microscope, there are so many subcategories of cancer, and it goes back to embryology. What's the basic cell embryologically? Which cell line does the cancer arise from? Is it neuroectodermal? Is it epithelial? Is it connective tissue? And a great point behind some of those great thinkers from 100 years ago is they recognized that as cells migrate, they do change behavior. So when you're just that little ball of cells, and you want those cells to divide and grow, but then have a stop signal. And what we're learning, or what we learned actually back in the 1940s, cancer has a different bioelectric charge than all of the other cells in our body. And so there was a study back in the 1940s, with almost 100% accuracy, they would put one electrode in the vaginal wall and then an electrode just above the pubis, and with almost 100% accuracy could diagnose just by the millivoltage change who had cancer and who didn't. And yet some of these approaches, I agree with you, some of these great thinkers, for whatever reason, went to the wayside and weren't recognized for the great work they were doing. And so we are hearing obviously about bioelectric approaches, metabolic approaches, this great importance of collaboration across the disciplines. This is for both of you. How do you see all of this transforming cancer care? Do you think we'll wake up some of those conventional thinking oncologists? Do you think we're going to see a move towards this more broad integrative approach? I'll let you start, Paul, and then Justin, I'll let you conclude that thought as well.
So Ryan, maybe we should talk about what the conventional thinking is in terms of the cause of cancer. So what I'm saying is the somatic mutation theory, which is the current paradigm on which cancer is based. And I think this probably goes back to the 1960s. So basically this theory is that it's due to a chromosomal mutation in a single cell that then gives rise to a whole population of cells with similar driver mutations, and that this then gives rise to the cancer. So this is the genetic or somatic mutation theory of cancer. And basically the approach to treatment is based on this therapy, on this approach. And so I think the data suggests that this approach is not correct. I don't know. As a pathologist, Ryan, what do you think? Do you think that this is correct? Because my understanding is that there are many reasons why the somatic mutation theory is in fact not correct.
Well, and I love the
Maybe.
experiment. Yeah, I love the experiment where what most people don't realize is we have two genomes in our cells. We have our nuclear genome, but we also have DNA in our mitochondria. And there was a study done where cancer cells in the laboratory, cancer cells that were obviously malignant, one took the mitochondria out of those malignant cancer cells and put them in normal cells, and then the normal cells started behaving as cancer, and vice versa, taking normal mitochondria out of normal cells and putting them into a malignant cell. Now the malignant cell started to behave in a normal fashion. So the fact that we focus on just breaks in the nuclear genetics or the nuclear DNA perhaps is misthought for generations of physicians. What if it does start at that metabolic level? Those little nuclear power plants of the cell, the mitochondria, what if they drive not only the cancer process, but they also drive the electrical charge of the cell. They drive what the cell can and can't do. So I agree with you. I think we've misthought this genetic approach for generations, and which explains why there's so many different appearances to cancer under the microscope, because the gradation of how those cells are behaving is different with every cancer and different with every individual. But I think it goes down to kind of a unifying consilience of it starts probably not in the nucleus. Now, there's a couple of rare leukemias and lymphomas where it's just a complete translocation of a couple chromosomes, yes. However, I think that's an area of cancer that most people don't understand, that we do need to rethink. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, I think the somatic mutation theory, the idea of trying to find a single silver bullet cure, money, prestige, and fame are all drawn together, almost like a law of physics. And you find some almost, I don't really want to say weird or strange, but because it's very disturbing, some of the treatments that are proposed in the pursuit of trying to find this magic cure-all. Of course, we all know that Big Pharma provides all the money for research, but also there's the prestige associated with finding a dramatic or interesting or spectacular cure. And overall, I've discovered that in the broadest sense, there's a lot of evidence already existing to support the overall approach in terms of integrative oncology. But of course, within there are many gaps in our understanding in terms of which patients with which cancers, with which protocols are going to benefit the most. So for a research institution, rather than picking one of those gaps in our understanding and doing research on that, they tend to lean towards the more spectacular, looking for a silver bullet cure. And it wastes so much of the resources. And being back in the UK for the last few weeks, it's really struck me that the bigger picture also includes the cancer charities, because it really struck me when I arrived back in the UK, the number of advertisements that the cancer charities are now broadcasting. And so I was curious and I checked online, and in 1 year alone, they spent £167 million on advertisements. So, obviously their argument would be that money spent on advertising allows them to generate even more money in donations. But that's obviously £167 million of people's money that they've donated that is being spent on marketing and advertisements. And what makes it even worse is they're promoting the wrong message. So they're stuck in this out-of-date model of the somatic mutation theory. And they're also trying to project this idea that a huge amount of progress has already been made based on that idea, which we know is not really true. The benefits that have been seen since the so-called war on cancer started have been very, let's say, not very significant, and not what we would expect for the amount of money, effort, and time that's been allocated towards it. So I think unfortunately, the institutions and the medical establishment has been lost, basically. I think the only way we can really move forward is by sort of ordinary people and patients becoming informed and really demanding a more integrative approach and looking for doctors who are willing to practice the integrative approach.
And that is a challenge. And I know Dr. Marik can address this because all of us in the medical profession get this question quite often. Can you please help me find someone in my area or my region who will take an integrative or an innovative approach to my cancer? I feel stuck in those systems, is what I hear the patients say. And unfortunately, and hopefully your documentary will bring this mindset forward, there aren't enough of these providers to guide a patient through this journey with something beyond just that chemo and radiation that the system may offer. I'm not saying that there aren't good oncologists out there. There's some great practitioners. What I am saying is the patients want more, and they want that education. They want that ability to go beyond what the system offers. And to your point, the incremental changes that we've seen within the system are really, or the outcomes, other than a handful of cancers where we have found certain things, for all those dollars and pounds and golden treasure spent, we really haven't extended the lifetime in many of these cases. So Paul, what do you think in terms of helping these patients find that alternative practitioner or provider wherever they may be in the world? What do you think an answer in this area is going to end up being?
Yeah, so I think that's the most difficult question to answer, because clearly the vast majority of people treating cancer, the oncologists, use chemotherapy. They have strict protocols. They work in hospitals or clinics that have strict protocols, and they'll follow those protocols. And it's based on the standard of care, and are not going to deviate, and are very reluctant to, adopting adjunctive or alternative or concurrent therapy. It's very difficult. I think patients need to be educated and families need to be educated. That's what we need to, that's what our role is, to make this information available and then to present it to their oncologists. Unfortunately, many of them will be reluctant to deviate from their standard of care. So therefore, the patient then has a number of choices to make. They can stick with an oncologist, or they can try to find a more integrative oncologist. The problem is that there aren't that many of them. So, and it depends on what part of the world that they live in. So, the patients can do it on their own, but that's not ideal because, it's complicated stuff and you need the guidance of a clinician. The other alternative is that the patients can stay with their oncologist, but find an integrative clinician who practice integrative medicine and can concurrently help the patient. Now, the problem is most oncologists will not accept to be involved. So it kind of has to be done in parallel, which is not ideal because you want to work as a team, but you have to do what you have to do sometimes. So you would have concurrently have an integrative clinician. The other is just to dump the oncologist, depending on what the cancer is, and find an integrative clinician who's prepared to follow, a more diverse approach. and just, and the clinician may not necessarily be an oncologist, but someone who practices integrative medicine, who understands the principles and is happy to guide the patient along. So it's not ideal. I think what would be the goal would be to educate oncologists that there are alternative ways of treating patients, to try and get them to embrace at least some of these approaches, or to allow the patient to concurrently, get therapy from a integrative practitioner, and for the oncologist to willingly accept such an approach. I think that would be preferable.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a challenge we face in medicine is this quote standard of care, which is legalistic, and it ignores the concept of the optimum of care. In lab medicine, you go to your doctor and, oh, you're in normal range. Well, what your doctor doesn't tell you is normal range is 2 standard deviations in each direction around that mean in the middle. And just because you're in normal range doesn't mean you're in optimal health. So, I mean, the same thing in oncology. What does real progress look like to you, Justin, in terms of, not looking for that single breakthrough, but this broader approach your documentary brings forward? What does real progress look like to you, especially for the patients and the families right now?
Yeah, as Paul said, really, the biggest problem is the availability of doctors who are willing to practice the integrative approach. I think, of course, online resources where people can look up if there are any integrative doctors in their area, and maybe there could be more medical conferences that might attract sort of other doctors on the periphery who are kind of curious, but by attending the conference, they get exposed to more of the information and, become more interested that way. And of course, that might be a way of sharing more information about the different protocols that different clinicians are using to try and fill some of these gaps in our understanding.
And that's one thing we're trying to do at the Independent Medical Alliance is not just the term alternative medicine, but innovative medicine. And Paul has been very innovative in bringing together his knowledge and folio in terms of cancer care. And there's things that we're all still learning. And I love that you bring that up, that education is where it all begins. And I think we need to encourage our colleagues in medicine to not be afraid of looking beyond what's there. If we stick with what's there, you're absolutely right, Justin, then it just basically becomes, well, more of the same. And most great discoveries in history were accidents. And if we're not looking, we'll never find things. And so I love that you're bringing this innovative thinking forward from doctors around the world. And it's so critically important that we open up our minds to understanding or bringing back those great heroes of history who did make phenomenal discoveries that went away or were covered up or just basically never applied. And yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of money and marketing and machine behind the cancer care system, but it's so critically important that education is at the forefront. And I think your documentary is going to give that opportunity for people to have, I like to say, their neurons sandpaper just a little bit so that they do wake up to perhaps and hopefully a new way of looking and thinking about things. Paul, what do you think progress looks like going forward?
Yeah, so there are two sides to this. So I think progress would be if the more integrative approach becomes more widely accepted, it gets more disseminated, and I think patients, can play an important role because, patients are much more informed, much more persuasive, they have much more controlled, and can push forward this agenda so that it becomes more widespread, so patients can demand. Basically, patients can be empowered and demand a change. I think that's probably, really important. But on the other hand, one has to be careful about there are unscrupulous practitioners who use techniques that maybe lack scientific validity, that charge patients a lot of money and take advantage of patients for financial gain. So they actually know better than the classical system. Maybe actually worse. These people some of them charge exorbitant amounts of money and do procedures and interventions that lack really good solid science. So one has to be cautious of that side of the coin. So there needs to be some kind of middle consensus as to what's a valid approach. And so I think Justin's film is a good starting point, because I think it highlights the various approaches that work. And as he said, and we've said, there's no single approach that is right, but there certainly are approaches that don't work, that have been shown to be harmful, that we should make sure that patients avoid.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Paul. And Justin, in your world travels, obviously you've been in a lot of places and seen a lot of different approaches. Have you noticed that culturally there are different mindsets or different degrees of openness to these? I don't like to say alternative. I like to say innovative, but I agree with Paul. There are probably some unscrupulous ones as well. What have you noticed culturally in your travels as you've put together this documentary and other medical documentaries? What do you see across the world that struck you?
I would say that generally across Asia, traditional therapies are still quite widely available. And in particular, in places like Malaysia and Taiwan, there's still quite good availability of traditional Chinese medicine. I haven't been to South Korea, but I'm told that in South Korea, integrative oncology is covered by the medical insurance. Apparently, it's the only country in the world that actually does that. So certainly across Asia, there's less influence from big pharma and the powerful financial interests, but the challenge that they have across Asia is a generational one. So the traditional Chinese medicine and other therapies are still the first thing that older people will try. But younger people have been kind of led towards this idea that that's something that only old people do, and it's old-fashioned and unscientific. So there's a bit of confusion in that area. But overall, there is greater availability of the natural treatments, and I would say more open-mindedness towards them.
Fascinating. Have you noticed, either one of you, and I know all of us have traveled to many places, have you noticed any cultures put an emphasis on prevention? I know we're talking about treatment and overcoming that breakthrough mindset, but have you noticed culturally areas that do focus a little more on health and wellness and preventing?
So you raise a really important question, Ryan, because it's estimated that maybe 40% of cancers are preventable by things people can do. So you would imagine it would be a public health imperative to enforce good lifestyle habits that reduce the risk of cancer. And so there are many things that one can do. Smoking is an interesting example, because I think smoking in the US has become somewhat considered taboo. So that really, I think, done a good job in emphasizing the harms of smoking, because obviously that's one of the really important causes of cancer. But in many European countries, people smoke in restaurants, smoke openly, which is quite surprising. And so I think there there's no question of doubt that cutting down on smoking has a major impact on, lung cancer. But there are other, other interventions we should be more mindful of. The use of pesticides and insecticides in our food source is somewhat worrying. And the artificial chemicals in our foods, which are carcinogenic, is somewhat worrisome. So, and then obviously the metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance is important, vitamin D deficiency, alcohol is an important factor. So there are many public health measures that should be really enforced to help reduce the risk of cancer.
Thoughts, Justin?
I think just about the use of chemicals. I mean, I'm constantly getting maybe far too annoyed, but when people around me unnecessarily spray ridiculous amounts of chemicals, either because they think it's going to smell in a more pleasant way, or to clean restaurant tables, or for all manner of uses. And there seems to be this idea that if the chemical is in a product, it's been properly studied to be safe. And of course, there are just countless examples where that's turned out to be not true. Unfortunately, I think all too often we have this feeling that the authorities are going to take care of us, and they would have eliminated dangerous chemicals, but it's absolutely, of course, not the case. Like I'm really cautious about being exposed to chemicals, having gone through the process of making this documentary film about cancer.
That's such a great point, and we live in such a toxic soup around the world now, and I think just those simple lifestyle things that Paul brought up, and so many things we can do. And you bring up the great point, Justin. Don't count on your public health official to come save you, because they're not going to. And this is where personal responsibility comes into that, while at the same time trying to change, legislatively, where each of us are in the world, what we can to minimize those risk factors. Well, I see Autumn has popped on the screen in the background here, so I know she's going to have some questions from the audience for us. I know we could talk for a long time, and many people are looking forward to seeing your documentary. So let's bring that up first, Autumn, before you even ask any questions, is when can we see the film, Justin?
Well, I'm still working out the full plan for the distribution, but there is going to be a free screening on November the 20th. So if people go to the website sovereigntv.com, then they can sign up for the free screening, and it will be available for a 24 hours period. And then, of course, after that, I can keep people updated about where the film's going to be.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And everybody go to Sovereign TV and make sure you catch that screening on November 20th. All right, Autumn, over to you.
Yes, hello, Dr. Cole, Dr. Marik, and Justin, and everyone watching. As Dr. Cole mentioned, my name is Autumn. I'll be guiding us through a few great questions that we have received from our viewers tonight. So I'm just going to jump right into that. Sorry, something in my throat. Although we can't give medical advice, we got a very moving question from somebody in our audience. Her name is Lynn. She said that she was just diagnosed with stage 3 esophageal cancer with 2 lymph nodes metastasized. The tumor is 7 centimeters, located at the bottom of her esophagus, almost at her stomach. She said that she has seen 3 oncologists, 2 allopathic, 1 holistic. She's been prescribed 28 treatments of radiation and 5 treatments of chemotherapy. Even the holistic oncologist said that the tumor was too large to start with a holistic approach. The 2 allopathic oncologists didn't seem open to a holistic approach. With all of that being said, do any of you have some words of wisdom or thoughts that you can share with her?
Yeah, well, if you remember 3 or 4 weeks ago, I can't remember exactly, we had a patient on the webinar who had the exact same esophageal cancer, which was pretty extensive. And the patient followed pretty much exclusively, well, I think the patient may have tried conventional therapy, which failed, and then used more holistic and was basically in remission and cancer-free. So I think you can never say it's too late. You can never say there's nothing you can do. We hear all the time, or we see all the time, patients with widely metastatic stage 4 disease who oncologists say they have got nothing they can do, who then adopt an approach of alternative therapy and go into remission. So, while we're not giving medical advice, I think this patient I would strongly recommend having a look at the alternative therapies that are available, because it's never too late and you've got really nothing to lose. And you really want to focus on the quality of life. So if we can improve the quality of life and avoid the toxicity of some of these terrible drugs, we've achieved something. But I think it's never too late. It's never too advanced. And there's always something that can be done, always. There's always hope. And there's always good reason to try a alternative approach.
And
Would you agree, Ryan?
Yeah, Justin brought this up earlier. I think that mindset going into what you're facing is critically important. I was at a meeting in Salt Lake this weekend, the Brownstone Conference, and on the way home, I visited with my parents. One of their elderly friends had prostate cancer. They'd asked me about 9 months ago, hey, what would you do if you had my condition? I gave them a list of things. I wasn't their doctor. I was just saying, well, if it were me, I would do this, 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 and this. Well, they happened to do all those things, and I'm grateful to report that patient is now cancer-free. Now, one of their other elderly friends said, hey, what did you recommend to so-and-so? I said, well, I recommended these things and lifestyle changes in addition, and now he wants to start that approach. So I think that mindset going into it, keeping the immune system functioning well, is very important as well.
So, of course, I'm not medically qualified, but just in terms of reporting some other things that doctors have told me when I've interviewed them or generally communicated with them, what comes up so often is the psychological aspects. And many of the doctors have told me that sometimes patients have tried everything, but it's only when they really try to get to grips with the psychological stress and the anxiety and other things associated with that, mindfulness, then suddenly many of the interventions can start working. So of course it's one of those things that's so easy to comment on, but so difficult to actually implement. But I think it's just worth mentioning.
Yeah, and God bless, the individual going through that. I know we all have empathetic heart towards the journey they're on. So, we're all hoping for the best.
And I know our team has been on top of it and sent the webinar that we did with Dale, among many other resources that we have on our website. Another question that we got from an anonymous attendee is for you, Justin. She said, or he, Justin, wonderful to hear your thoughts tonight. Really looking forward to watching your documentary. Do you address the emotional trigger / component for creating cancer? It's my belief that the cause of cancer is diet, environment, and lifestyle choices, not solely genetics. The former list contributes to whether or not the gene is turned on or off. Thank you again.
Yeah, for sure. So we do mention that a couple of times in the documentary, and also in terms of its potential to be a direct cause or to set the stage really to predispose people to unfortunately developing the disease. So yes, yeah, it's mentioned.
Another question we got from Terry H. She said, there is a research article in Science Advances, the June 5th, 2024, entitled An Unexpected Role for the Ketogenic Diet in Triggering Tumor Metastases by Modulating Batch 1 Mediated Transcription. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. The title tells the finding. What do you think of this? Could a ketogenic diet actually cause a metastases instead of treating it?
Well, a criticism of that paper, I know the one to which you refer, is there's no evidence that they used an organic whole fats, healthy fats, non-Western keto diet. So was it seed oils? Was it other types of oils that actually mess with the membrane potential in your immune system and your immune cells? So, there's a lot of criticism of the keto diet. I get it, sure, but it changed my life personally many years ago. And if you do it organically and eat healthy organic fats, I think that's a big difference. The criticism of that paper is what fat substitutes were used in that particular protocol. And the authors failed to actually reveal what the patients were eating, which makes that paper very, very suspect, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think as a general rule, I think ketogenic diets, and there are multiple studies and in multiple different scenarios, that the ketogenic diet is of enormous benefit to patients with cancer. And I think that should be the bottom line. So one should not be fearful of a ketogenic diet.
Since we're already at the top of the hour, this will be the last question. L. Oster asked, any research or reports with freezing tumors as a treatment, possible application for an undiagnosed breast lump?
Well, I mean, there's so many different approaches. Some are very unique and innovative, and I think if we don't try, we'll never know. There's opportunities to freeze tumors, to bind chemicals and shine light and overheat tumors with nanoflakes. There are so many different approaches, and we'll never know if we don't try. The challenge is just making sure we know where the tumor is. If it's isolated to one place, that makes it easy. But if it's already spread, well, you've eliminated the main tumor, but it's gone elsewhere. So I think it's critically important to keep an open mind in science and research and medicine to many approaches. And I think the benefit of Justin's documentary is let's open our mind to the possibilities and not count on one unique breakthrough per se. Thoughts, Paul or Justin?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a combination of things. It's not going to be one single approach. It's going to be diet, it's going to be mindset, having a good mindset approach, because I think that's fundamentally important in stress reduction. It's going to be diet, it's going to be repurposed drugs. It may include conventional chemotherapy in smaller doses. So I think that it's going to be multiple approaches simultaneously that attack the cancer from different angles rather than one single magic bullet.
I think it was interesting for me to find out that metformin can be useful in the treatment of cancer. And thinking about the ketogenic diet and the cancer as a metabolic disease, then we can see how it kind of starts to make sense that a medication that helps to control blood glucose levels and improve insulin sensitivity could tie in with the theory that cancer is a metabolic disease. So yeah, I think for me it was an interesting example of how things can fit together in the integrative approach.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us tonight, Justin. I know Autumn's going to go on to announcements, but it's late where Justin is, so very grateful that he was willing to join us from across the pond and share his insights, and looking very much forward to the screening of the documentary. And thank you for your work and your education of the public, and hopefully this opens the mind. So thank you so much for your efforts, Justin, and thank you as well, Paul. And we'll turn it over to you, Autumn, for final announcements.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cole. Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Dr. Marik and Dr. Cole. All right, well, I'll move over to our announcements now. We are so excited to welcome 6 new fellows to our senior fellowship program, representing specialties in integrative medicine, psychiatry, oncology, neurosurgery, and more. Their names and specialties are on screen now, but if you'd like to learn more about each of these amazing doctors, you can scan the QR code that's on screen right now, visit the short link, or search imahealth.org, and you can find an article on our homepage doing a deep dive for each of these inspiring individuals. We're just so happy that our fellowship program continues to grow with so many leaders advancing honest integrative medicine. So next week, we hope you'll join us on Wednesday, November 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern for a very special episode titled Journal of Independent Medicine, Number 4, New IMA Research Insights, featuring tonight's host, IMA Senior Fellow Dr. Ryan Cole, our co-founders, Dr. Joseph Verone, and Dr. Paul Marik, and IMA Director of Research, Matt Halma. On this date, we'll also be releasing the 4th edition of the Journal of Independent Medicine as well. So this episode will be highlighting key findings from that new edition, along with other important research that our team has been leading. You won't want to miss this deep dive into the science shaping the future of independent, honest medicine. Save the date. Our next IMA conference is set to take place in Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth area on Friday, April 17th through Saturday, April 18th of next year. You can fill out the form linked on screen to be the first to know more information about this event, such as early bird ticket sales, and to receive details on discounted hotel rates as soon as they're available. So more updates are on their way, so please sign up now at that link on screen or by just visiting our website. The URL is imahealth.org/save-the-date IMA-2026. So we would love for you to sign up there. So we also have a new guide that we are excited to share, a new resource focusing on understanding prostate health by Dr. Christina Carmen. This evidence-based guide explores smarter strategies for men's health, from screening pitfalls to functional labs, nutrition, supplements, and lifestyle changes that support prevention in a long-term vitality. It's a practical look at how you can move beyond the numbers and make informed decisions for lasting wellness. You can find the guide by scanning the QR code again on screen or by searching the short link. All right, well, that is all that we have for you tonight. But before we close, we wanted to share the trailer for Beyond Breakthrough, the Shift in Cancer Care, in case you missed it at the start of the show. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope you have a good night. Let's take a look.
Overall, $500 billion have been spent on cancer, and the gains have been very small.
President Nixon declared, quote, war against cancer. I think most people would agree that the war has not been won.
I thought we are making great progress, I'm at the place where I can make a difference. But today, I must say, I have a much more limited appreciation of these little gains.
Are we improving your quality of life and prolonging your lives? Or are we prolonging your deaths?
This is cancer.
Cancer will become the single commonest cause of death on the globe. Currently, 1 in 3 women, 1 in 2 men will develop cancer in their lifetime.
The mom got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Now the father got diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma. And they have 7 years old, 5 years old. This is a tragedy. 30 years of practice in medicine, this never used to happen.
In terms of curing cancer, we're not there. And so you might think that looking elsewhere at other ideas could be productive. And that's precisely what we're doing.
I was completely surprised at the amount of data there is supporting, scientific data supporting the use of non-conventional therapy for the treatment of cancer.
It was shocking when I went deeper into that rabbit hole to find that there was even Nobel prize-winning science behind this healing-based strategy. I mean, this was shocking to me because nobody brought this up in any conversation. I never knew these things existed even.
We give them only chemo and radio. There are so many other things that could have been done.
We are guilty. We are doing a crime by not teaching our medical students what was taught thousands of years ago. We should combine it together because it works together.
By incorporating healing-based strategies, I've seen phenomenal outcomes and results, and longer term recoveries and stable remissions, etc., which far exceed what that $500 billion has been able to achieve.